We read from the Gospel according to St. John, chapter 1, beginning to read at verse 43. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." "Nazareth? Can anything good come from there?" Nathanael asked. "Come and see," said Philip. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said of him, "Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." Then Nathanael declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus said, "You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You will see greater things than that." He then added, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." May God help us to understand his word. Amen. We read from the book of Genesis, chapter 28, beginning to read at verse 10. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you, and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." He was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me, and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. and of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. May God help us to understand his word. Amen. Do you feel God is with you? Not just in church, but at home, in the street, in the midst of daily life. Not just when you are praying, but when you are working, when you are dealing with the everyday problems you meet, when you're enjoying yourself, or when you're feeling sad. Or does God seem strangely absent then? No doubt Jacob was feeling that God was absent. He had fled his family after stealing his father's blessing from his brother. He was afraid his brother would kill him. He needed to put as much distance between himself and his brother as he could. He was fleeing from all that was familiar through a strange land. And maybe he thought he was fleeing from God too, because he hadn't actually been living his life by God's standards. But God appears to him even in that situation and assures Jacob that he is with him, and makes 3 promises to Jacob. I want us to look more closely at what God said to Jacob and consider whether God may be saying something similar to us in our situation. Firstly, God said he would be with Jacob. That's what the stairway that we sometimes call a ladder was all about. God was with Jacob. He had access to Jacob, and Jacob had access to him at that very place, in the middle of nowhere. It was not an especially holy place at that time. It was just the place Jacob happened to be. And God was promising to be with Jacob not only there, but everywhere. The stairway or ladder had angels going up and down on it. Not winged creatures, but God's messengers. God is in constant contact with earth and human beings. There are no not spots in God's Wi-Fi. He is always there, sending us messages. But are we listening? And he is also ready to hear our messages to him. But can we be bothered to send any? Jesus compared himself to Jacob's stairway. He told Nathanael, "You will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." He says he is God's communication channel with human beings. He is always with us. He conveys God's message to us and our messages to God. He calls us into such a close relationship with him that God is with us wherever we go, and we are always in touch with God. God says to us, as he said to Jacob, "I am with you." And through Jesus he tells us, "I will be with you always to the end of the world." Will we draw close to God through Jesus, so we can know him to be always with us in every part of our lives, and so we can be in constant touch with him? So firstly, God promised to be with Jacob. Secondly, God promised Jacob protection. Jacob was in fear of his life. He was probably more afraid than he needed to be. His brother Esau was impulsive. He might well have killed Jacob if he had caught him that day, but he was easily distracted and soon gave up trying to find him. He was probably glad to be rid of the pest. But Jacob was not to know that. He was afraid. But God promised him protection. And he needed it. Maybe his brother was not in active pursuit, but anyone on the run from their family and friends is in danger. People then, as now, are suspicious of strangers. They might exploit a stranger because they have no one to stand up for them. They might rob or kill a stranger thinking that no one would care about them. In those days there was no police. You depended on your family or clan to protect you or to see that justice was done if you were wronged. Jacob was a refugee with no support. He needed God's help. Christian believers are in a similar situation. We have no abiding city here, as the letter to the Hebrews says. This earth is not our home. Heaven is our home. We do not live our lives by the same principles as other people around. We are different, and therefore other people might be suspicious of us or afraid of us. For this reason, many Christians in the world are persecuted on account of their faith. Even if we are not threatened with physical violence or wrongful judicial action, we may suffer from opposition or marginalisation or abuse. We need God's protection too from all that the forces of evil can throw at us. God promised to be with Jacob. God promised Jacob his protection. And God promised to bring Jacob back home. For Jacob, that meant the land God had promised to give to Abraham and his own father. For us Christians, our home is God's coming kingdom, and he promises to bring us there. Jacob had to spend many years with his relative Laban in what we now call Syria, and he found it very difficult to get away. Then later on, he and his family were forced to seek refuge in Egypt from famine, only to escape generations later due to God's miraculous intervention under Moses. And things did not always go well from then on. But God kept his promise. And he will always keep his promise to us too, though he might take his time. The letter to the Hebrews has a phrase, all these people were still living by faith when they died. And sometimes God went a very funny way about keeping his promise, like allowing his people to be exiled before they were brought back to the land, and letting Jesus be crucified before God raised him from the dead. God will keep his promise to us too. But will we trust him, even if it takes a very long time, and even if he seems to be going a very strange way about it? God promises to be with us, to protect us, and to bring us home. Will we draw closer to him in prayer and fellowship so that we can know his presence and keep in contact? Will we seek in him the protection we need? And will we trust him to keep his promise to bring us at last to his kingdom in glory? I pray that we will. Amen.